The Accurate Conception is the third episode of the 5th season of The Golden Girls. This is directed by Terry Hughes, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. It's a decent episode. I think it touches on a really important topic, and while I think attitudes about artificial insemination are a little different today, I feel like it's more widely accepted. Obviously, at the time, that wasn't necessarily going to be the case. And that is the topic for the episode. So I will go through things. I will actually go through this one chronologically. Sometimes with the Golden Girls, I will talk about separate parts of the narrative, but with this one, it just flows really well with my notes going chronologically. So there will, of course, be spoilers as I go through this. And it starts off with Blanche excited that she's bonding with Rebecca. And then Rebecca tells her that she's going to be artificially inseminated. And Blanche tells the other three, and they just stare at her and stare at her. And of course, it's such a bizarre concept to them that this just is not something, certainly with Blanche, it's not something she thought Rebecca would say to her. But for the others, it's just a strange concept. Whereas again, I feel like today, if somebody were to say they're going to be artificially inseminated, the initial response, and I'm speculating here, but I feel like the initial response wouldn't be, that's gross, as was a lot of their responses. It would be more about, can you financially support a child on your own? Are you going to be able to do this without somebody there for you? If Rebecca has to go to work, is she going to be able to take time off to raise the child? I feel like those would be the current concerns today. Whereas in the episode, the concerns were more about just the process of insemination itself. And I feel like that's a little bit different. And every now and then, the Golden Girls will address something that has a different attitude than it does today. And that's one of the things I love about watching it now. I'm sure I would have loved it at the time had I been alive, but watching it now, I love seeing shifts in attitudes. I think it's really, really fascinating. And Rose then tells a story about how people were dressed up as sandwiches. It's not what I thought she was going to be talking about. And Blanche didn't have a positive response to this. And the following morning, she says to the others, "Oh, I feel terrible. If I'm going to spend the night tossing and turning, at least I want to wake up smelling like aftershave." The line itself is quite funny, but Rose's face at that moment, I just thought was fabulous. Her facial expression was brilliant. And Rebecca says that she did some research. There's a sperm bank nearby, and she's going to go. And they're basically making it like a day out. Rose said, "I'll bring my camera. It's never too soon to start a baby book," which I guess is a valid point. And Sophia wants to go, but Dorothy says that she's not allowed to do anything as strenuous as going to the sperm bank. I don't know what Dorothy thinks it involves until she's had her physical with the doctor. So Sophia says, "All right, I'll go to the doctor, but this better be a great sperm bank." And I love the fact that everybody's starting to actually get excited about this, and they're going to have a day out. Well, Sophia and Rose primarily are excited. And off they go. And the bulk of the rest of the episode is at the sperm bank. And it's very clear that Blanche is still uneasy about this. But I don't think she's going about it the right way. She can absolutely have concerns about this. But to say, "I feel like I'm in the middle of an awful dream," is not what you say when your daughter is about to become pregnant, in theory, if it works. And that's just a really horrible attitude to have. That's not helpful. And I don't think Blanche was being very respectful at all. And it's not nice to see. Again, I feel like maybe she's valid in those feelings, but that doesn't necessarily give her the right to say it out loud when her daughter's just about to go through with this. And she ends up leaving. And she still feels really bad about this. And we're near the end of the episode now. There's not a lot of variety in what's said. The actual narrative itself is maybe not the most interesting because not a lot happens, but the emotions of the characters are really fascinating. And as I said, watching this now, when attitudes are generally a little bit different, I'm sure there are people who still feel the same way that Blanche does in this episode, but generally speaking, I feel like it's more widely accepted because I think there's a lot more knowledge about it. But the emotions, as real as they are, I think there are some good examples here of how not to inform people of those emotions, and to say that you're in the middle of an awful dream is just an absolutely terrible thing to say. You can voice your concerns, but if it's not going to be helpful or constructive, there's no point. And this is, I kind of think, what Blanche was realising. And she said something that I thought was really interesting. At the end of the episode, I think she's feeling guilty about the way she reacted. And she's talking to the others, and she said, How do you say sorry to your own child? What are you talking about, Blanche? It should never be difficult to say sorry to your own child. I feel like that's an absolutely awful way of thinking. It's incredibly self-righteous. No parent should think that they are above their child when it comes to saying sorry, because everybody should be able to say sorry to everybody, because everybody can hurt somebody. And Blanche hurt her daughter, so why is she finding it difficult to apologise? She shouldn't. And I find that to be really uncomfortable, that she's basically saying, well, I'm the mother, so why should I apologise? Basically saying she's never had to apologise before. And I don't know if that's not necessarily true. I'm trying to think back to previous episodes with Rebecca, if Blanche ever has said sorry to her. Probably has done, I can't remember. But the fact there is that it's not a common occurrence. But let's face it, parents and children will often have things to apologise to each other for, because when you spend so much time with somebody, especially when growing up, you're going to hurt each other's feelings and get on each other's nerves, and a parent should not find it difficult to apologise to a child. And I really think that that's a really unhelpful attitude. And in general, Blanche was just not a good person in this episode. Again, I think her feelings are valid. Some of them, not all of them. But finding it difficult to apologise to a child should never be a thing. But in terms of being concerned for her daughter, yeah, I think that's fair enough. But she went about everything the wrong way until the very end, when she was finally able to say the right things. And it was a really sweet moment, and everybody was happy again. And it was a nice way to end the episode. So I think it definitely deals with an important topic. I imagine there are a lot of people, even today, who feel like Blanche, not necessarily because of the whole process of being artificially inseminated. There were multiple times when the characters pulled faces in disgust at the idea of the process of how it works. But there will be people who are maybe uncomfortable with the idea of not knowing who the child's biological father is, who the sperm donor is. And I think, again, that's valid. But here we have an example of how not to voice those concerns and how to talk to your child about these things, because Blanche was not great in this episode, but I think she offered a lot of really important discussion points about how to approach this situation, and more importantly, how not to approach the situation. So I think at the time it probably would have been really effective, but even today I think there are still some attitudes that could benefit from this episode. And ultimately we had some funny moments, mostly from Rose. Actually, I think Rose and Sophia were definitely highlights in this one. And Blanche, while I didn't like her attitude, definitely brought a lot of value to this, with showing how not to react in this kind of situation. And all things considered, the accurate conception, it's not a bad episode of The Golden Girls.